Strive presents. Oh, got to get ready.
Laptop. Plant, that looks nice there.
Ooh, cookies, yum.
Notebook.
Microphone, webcam, and coffee, of course. A video podcast where deaf, hard of hearing, and disabled creatives and their allies chat about experiences, best practice, and the future of the arts. The Green Room.
Ramps on the Moon. Take over.
Hello, hi, and welcome to the Green Room. Excited to be here again. So I will be hosting this evening, and my name is Stephen Collins. I will be signing throughout this evening, and my voice this evening will be Anna Kitson. So you will hear her voice throughout the interview. So Anna, could you introduce yourself? Hello, my name is Anna. My sign name is this, like you're rolling up your sleeves. I'm a white female with a blue jumper and a white background. Great, thanks, Anna. So who am I? I am an actor. I'm a white, deaf male. I have brown hair and a ginger beard. My background is also white. So anyway, where are we? What are we going to be talking about? What is this series about? So you may be aware of a company called Ramps on the Moon. And throughout the series, we're going to set up 5 different episodes talking about the creative process and how we put together a Ramps on the Moon production. And this one was led by Leeds Playhouse. And the show we're going to be talking about is Oliver Twist. So each episode, we're going to be talking about a different perspective of a theatrical production. I am so excited that we're setting this up. And so we're going to have all these different discussions, really focusing in on Oliver Twist and the different characters. So myself, I played Bill Sikes. And I have absolute pleasure of introducing you to our 2 guests this evening. The first being Amy Leach.
Hello everybody, my name's Amy. I was the director of Oliver Twist and I'm the associate director at Leeds Playhouse. I'm a white woman, I'm wearing a blue and white striped t-shirt and I'm in front of a white background. And interpreting for me today is Amy, and I'm going to ask Amy to describe herself.
Hello, my name is Amy. I am providing the BSL for Amy tonight. I am also a white female. I have brown hair and I have a green background.
Great. Thank you both, Amy's. And Daryl, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, so my name's Daryl, sign name Daryl, using 4 fingers to the eye and then brushing away like eyelashes. And that's linked with when I was a baby, I had very tall eyelashes, but thank God they've shrunk now. So that's my sign name, Daryl. So I've got a white beard and a brown moustache. It's a bit white at the moment, sorry. Oh, just make sure people can't see me. But my background is a pillowy background with a blue colour to it. I've got a blue jean jacket and a t-shirt underneath. And my interpreter, who's my voice today, is Tom. So I'd like to introduce Tom. Hello, I'm Tom. I'm a white male wearing a black jumper. My background is a curtain that is grey, and I have short hair and a beard.
So today we're going to be having an in-depth discussion about Oliver Twist. And what I want to let you know is right now you can actually watch the online production of Oliver Twist on the Leeds Playhouse website. You can go there and watch the full show. But today, for now, we're going to be having an in-depth discussion on the deaf perspective of the production. So, without further ado, Amy and Daryl, welcome to the discussion this evening. So Amy, yourself as the director of Oliver Twist, how did the whole process begin? Where did the idea come from? how did you, what made you start thinking about integrating British Sign Language and spoken English and all of that? Tell us everything.
Yeah, so the Ramps on the Moon project has now been going for about 5 years, and the whole idea of the project is to normalise the presence of deaf and disabled people both on and off stages. And Leeds Playhouse are one of a consortium of theatres who were part of that project, and it was our turn to do the big Ramps on the Moon production last year in 2020. And the idea of the productions that happen as part of Ramps on the Moon are that they are large pieces of theatre of well-known stories, and they're on the biggest stages at each of those theatres, and that they are performed and created by an integrated company of deaf, disabled and non-disabled artists, both on and off stage. And that every single show has integrated British Sign Language, captioning and audio description creatively layered into the show. So I suppose the idea for Oliver Twist started kind of quite a while ago, really. And I'd watched all of the other Ramps on the Moon productions and had been wondering, I wonder if I ever got to direct one of these. What might I choose? What would be the story to look at? And had been really thinking about the idea of ensemble work within that, and storytelling work, and just thought that Dickens would provide a really fantastic opportunity to completely adapt and start from fresh with a story that people think they know, but actually to look at that through a new perspective, and that it would provide a whole load of juicy characters for people to play, and a great story to tell. And so that's where we started, really. And I think in terms of the journey to actually think about, so it was a given that there had to be British Sign Language in it, and there had to be captioning, and those had to be creative layers. But I think what we found really early on, and Stephen, you were with me when we realised this, was thinking really early on about how could, if we did a new adaptation, that we could actually have characters that were written from the beginning as deaf characters, as disabled characters. We could think about their world, we could think about the history that they existed in, we could think about how their culture or lack of access impacted on their lives. We could think about how sign language was used in creative ways, so thinking about the gang and how they spoke. And I think all of that kind of, that was the opportunity of a new adaptation, really, was we could put all of that in there, and that was really, really exciting process to go on.
Perfect, fabulous. So am I right that you actually brought in a writer, Bryony Lavery, and who adapted the book? Is that correct? I don't know if you could speak more about that and that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So Bryony Lavery is the adapter of this text, and Bryony is a really experienced playwright. She's so experienced. She, you know, she could have done an adaptation of Oliver Twist, stood on her head. But what was really exciting about Bryony is, even though she's so experienced, she's so open to exploring new ways, finding new things, learning herself. So, and we've actually recorded another of these green rooms with Bryony to talk kind of in more detail about that writing process. So I won't kind of recap everything. But what was great with that was before Bryony even wrote any text at all, we did a big R&D. It featured a lot of deaf and disabled people in that R&D. Stephen, you were part of that. Yes. And we got to explore, look at moments in the play, story beats, moments of the story that we could then have a look at. Well, how might we start to make this moment accessible for a blind audience and for a deaf audience? How might this moment of the story be different if these characters are deaf? Or and so actually that was a really brilliant thing. So even before we started writing, we actually had done this R&D to start to explore the possibilities. And I remember Jenny Seeley was part of that as well, and was really fantastic in terms of bringing lots of brilliant ideas to the table. We had lots of deaf creatives as part of that, so that really planted so many seeds that grew through the production.
Yes, I actually remember that R&D very well. I think there were sort of 6 or so deaf creatives involved. So there was a real amazing blend and hot pot of sign language and spoken English, and just sitting down and discussing the story and the narrative. So I remember Bryony So it's slightly different to Daryl's sign. So she still has the twinkly eyes. So Bryony, the writer, we were discussing the whole language of the script and how that would be perceived back in that era of the setting of Oliver Twist, and also changing around between the sign language and the spoken language, and how the grammar structures differentiate the order, the syntactical order. So I know we were drilling in on one or two scenes, and Bryony was really fascinated about how we could drop all these elements into a script, but make it accessible to everybody that was involved. And, you know, write it ultimately in the BSL order, the word order. So, you know, thank you. It's just been so amazing to have that adaptability and openness of creating that sort of script. So, Daryl, coming to you, yourself, the hat you were wearing in this particular production was the BSL consultant. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your role incorporated? How did you manage the process of incorporating managing the sign language that would have been used back in the era of Oliver Twist? What were the things that you wanted to really unpack? How did you prioritize what you needed to focus on? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so really, like the first thing when I start any production actually, and get involved in anything theatre wise, I always think about the vision, like what is the actual the image that's going to be there, and what's going to and the sort of main concept that's going to be running throughout the performance. Also thinking about the signing itself, and really thinking about that visual challenge of trying to think about technical terminology and how we're going to set it up, and what will work, what won't work, what is achievable as well. And also looking at the interpreter as well and what they're doing.
So stylizing the sign language.
Yeah, and the different elements involved in that.
Sorry, can we go back again, Daryl? You were talking about the timeline. I think, can we just go back to that little point? Is that right, if we could get you to repeat that?
Yeah, fine. Sorry. Yeah, think about the timeline. With the play, when was it actually happening and the different areas within that and the era? So, for example, with Oliver, it was really like the new sort of style and expecting signing in that. And in Victorian times, Georgian times, the awareness of that, thinking about how signing would be used. And when you're talking about historical signs, like, for example, oh, what time is it? You won't have time. So you'd have time maybe using a stopwatch instead, so pulling a watch out of your pocket to kind of say, oh, what time is it, rather than a watch. And really just think about what's in society and what's happening in society at that time. And a lot more people being more polite and thinking about the manners of people and how do you involve that into the signing itself. And maybe some people are more lazy and more like leaning around and that difference in personality type. So it's really thinking about that group of people and what is their signing style, and maybe the example, the posher people and how they kind of shun off other groups. So really that linguistic elements within that. For example, with Oliver, there's a certain group who are very the gang, who are very much putting people down and very strong in their opinions. And then there's the darker group, the thieving group, who is more like in with each other. And talking about like, sorry, what's this?
All the gang signed, so the full, Dodger's gang, Fagin's gang all signed. So there were lots of different elements, just trying to fit them all together in terms of era that was being represented, the affluency of people, or whether they were sort of living on the streets, and just really try and get a blend and a mix to show that differentiation of who was signing which character and who they represented in society, and that sort of language split. And just get that kind of shift so everyone could sort of really relate to that and buy into that. So we really sort of focused on that in terms of the translation process and picked out elements of the script so that it could be visually shown through the characters on stage and get those different perspectives sort of seen and heard.
Yeah, so for example, with signing with the police, at that time using handcuffs, we wanted to make sure we kept that same style. Doctors, we were using a lot more their equipment that matches that, so jargon. So we had to do the research that matched their style. I mean, altogether, the translation for each character and thinking about their signing for every single character and how they would sign, and making sure it's visual, thinking about positioning, and then making sure, can we understand that person? Or when something happens over there, how can they change to kind of move people around? So really, we're talking about that creative role, and what would it look like, and how do we make sure it's accessible and also creative as well, and making sure that, you know, it's an art form, really.
Oh gosh, I absolutely agree wholeheartedly with you, Daryl. Yeah. And I think it was beautiful when you've got the written story, if you like, and how it was written ultimately in BSL, and then through Bryony's research of really adapting the content of the play itself, you know, going back in time to those Victorian times, back to, was it 1800s or so? I think it was 1830s, perhaps. And then we shifted to later on to a specific time later on, where it became more important to know the sort of the characters and the deaf characters and their roles. So Oliver Twist, the character itself, was a deaf actor. Fagin and Nancy and Bill Sikes were also deaf, and Rose. So there were 6 deaf creative artists and actors that were performing on stage and using sign language within this production, which was just amazing, just fabulous. And I know, you know, Amy was really strong in bringing this group together and the different characters and ensuring there were lead roles that were represented by deaf creatives. But I think that the process that we followed by both of you and the both of you led was just amazing. And I think also what we were embedding in, not only deaf culture, but deaf history was being entwined and weaved throughout the production of the story. I don't know if either of you could talk more to that.
Amy, maybe you want to reply to that one?
Yeah, so like Stephen said, I think moving the play from when it was written in the 1830s and shifting it to the late 1800s meant that we could think about the impact of the Milan Conference on the story. And that was obviously a big area of learning, because I'd never heard, as a hearing person, I'd never heard about the Milan Conference. And that was really interesting to think about the world that we were existing in, and then therefore how it impacted on all the characters. And like Stephen says, actually pretty much all of what you might call the kind of key characters, the characters we all know from Oliver Twist as a story, were pretty much all deaf characters, but actually across a real spectrum of deafness as well. And what was interesting, where you had kind of Bill and Fagin, who were quite grassroots deaf, and, you know, Bill insisting that people sign and not speak, turn their voices off, right through to, at the other end, Rose, who is a character who is deaf but has been brought up in an oralism tradition. Her father, we kind of suggested that Mr. Brownlow had kind of, he's a follower, an acolyte of Alexander Graham Bell, and so that was really interesting to see how he interacted, making her use an ear trumpet, making her speak, use her voice, and then also when Oliver goes to live with them, suddenly seeing how he tries to make Oliver speak, ties Oliver's hands behind his back, you know, kind of tries to get him to do lots of speech therapy. So I think that was, I learned so much about deaf culture, deaf experience, deaf history through this process. And I hope also for audiences coming to watch this production who don't know anything about any of that, that's a real eye-opener as well. But I also hope that all of that gorgeous detail that came from all of our deaf members of the team also means that for deaf audiences watching, there's a kind of there's a respect and a kind of recognition of their own experiences and history, and that's gorgeous, and it brought such an interesting new perspective to the story of Oliver Twist. It took this story that we all feel we know and actually found all these new layers in it, which were just so brilliant and brutal and interesting and moving. So that was a very exciting process, and I feel very grateful to all of the deaf artists that we worked with on and off stage through that process, who shared so much, who were, you know, teachers in that space, who imparted all of that knowledge so that we could weave that into the fabric of the piece. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you also brought in Adam Bassett into the space, and Hannah Quigley, that was involved last year as well as an associate director, and then Adam came on board. So through that process, and I think myself as an actor, I was just really open to every scene. You know, maybe Daryl was there or wasn't there, and you know, we were sort of sitting around and just sitting back and watching and discussing and having questions and ideas, and just, you know, every scene, if it was spoken, we were giving a reason as to why that deaf person was there and why each character was there and what would be done in that time, and you know, and every layer in that aspect, who they were representing, and also to make it visual. So we didn't want to overwhelm with a lot of signing. There would be, like, you know, a belly for the baby. We wanted to really bring visual elements. There was a ring that was an important part of a character. So I think, again, the watching part of it never stopped. There was always something to entertain the senses, and it was a real sort of visual feast in that respect, in terms of what we brought to the stage. So, and I think, yeah, did you want to add anything else in terms of the characterization, Daryl?
Yeah, sometimes when I was talking, and always with BSL, thinking more in depth and thinking about the word in BSL, it's not always just a sign. It's kind of like the whole concept, and where are they stood, how do they present themselves. Also, I mean, the sign as well itself, and the variety of different signs available, and it's kind of a creation of society, and thinking about the society back then. So you can have like two parallel worlds almost, of the deaf culture and the hearing culture, and how they collide and how they come together. And they're thinking about that gestural language that's being used as well, and there are elements of VV as well, visual vernacular. And it was really beautiful for the deaf audience, I mean for all the audience, to have, not just to have continuous sign all the way through, but to have very much, like, rather than just to have this binary singular motion, but to have this variety. It was with some of the gangs, there's a lot more of creative gestural language, a lot more visual language, a lot more movement. I mean, and really that itself explained it. You didn't need a voice, and you didn't need those additional things. You left your ears for the hearing, and the eyes were used for the deaf audience, and you could watch that and see that. And what I found really interesting was, I was quite aware that the audience was very varied. So how would you give like a flavour of when you've got a voice, if the actor's signing, using that BSL order? So we use that BSL order within the language. I mean, really, we like the deaf. We've a lot of, some deaf people quite like Shakespeare, and using that within that, and then thinking about how the audio description worked alongside of that. It was really quite a creative style, and I thought especially Amy, like, it was amazing, opening up so many different doors and different ideas, and making sure we look into how we can deliver that to a variety of different people. So with Ramps on the Moon, thinking about making it accessible to so many different varieties of people, and how the audience can enjoy that, and then kind of switching between that. Oh, there's no signing, then there is signing, then there was very strong VV, and then there was a voice, and that having that variety of different accessibilities on one stage is really amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I really think this production was amazing, as Amy was saying. You know, we went everything from grassroots sign to how you know, hard of hearing would communicate. So all these different ways of communicating. So we had an old-fashioned hearing
ear trumpet.
Ear trumpet, thank you. Yes, that was used by one of the characters. as to how they might actually try and hear better back in the Victorian day. So we're really trying to reflect in every way possible and characterize each deaf individual to show that individual communication need and approach. So there was a real blend, and this was done through several meetings and discussions. Oh gosh, Stephen, sorry, I've lost you.
So I'm talking about at the Milan Conference.
I know, but I lost him before that.
Sorry.
So I lost you after the ear trumpet. It was so beautiful watching the characterization through the play. So we had everything from grassroots sign to how a hard of hearing deaf individual would communicate orally and use an ear trumpet to pick up sounds and speech back in that Victorian era. So that was really great to sort of visually show that real variety of communication needs and approaches. And you know, there were also underlying characterizations of not liking each other and supporting each other and putting each other down, and just also showing that cultural oppression of oralism, you know, and that assertive way of how society looked down upon sign language initially. And so when Oliver Twist was born into this society, he was born into a hearing world and didn't understand anything that was happening around him. And so didn't know any sign language that was taught later by a character. I think it was Bill Sikes. And I think you know, Bill Sikes was so angry about the oppression that the deaf community was experiencing. So there was this disgust and dislike about oralism. And he was determined to bring in sign language, and that was his fight. You know, he was determined that his gang and his community would only sign. So if he could see any speech, that was, I think, maybe there was essences of jealousy, but there was a real mix and different, real deep layers of how the different characters approached and experienced this time of cultural oppression and different ways of communication. I think it was just amazing of how we really got that across. Moving on to the rehearsal process. I mean, we had 12 weeks of rehearsal. I think also, yeah, we had 8 weeks of rehearsals last year, plus and then plus the initial weeks earlier before the official launch earlier this year. So I don't know, can you talk to me about in terms of the rehearsal process and how we really approach that? Talk to me more about, yeah, the rehearsal process. How was it with all the actors?
Amy?
Yeah, so the first kind of bit, we were actually in the rehearsal room for 6 weeks, which actually isn't very long at all, considering how many things we were trying to do that first time around. And so that was what was so lovely about getting to come back to it more recently. The process was, the thing that felt really important about the process was at the very beginning to ask everybody what they needed to do their best work from each other and what they needed other people to know about to do their best work. And that's kind of where we started, really, because this was a team of a whole variety of disabilities, of deaf people across a whole range of communication styles. So it was really important that we just established how we're all going to support each other to do our best work. So that was one really important thing. And that's kind of where we started. We then spent most of the first week reading through the play. And it took us most of the first week to get through it. We didn't do a traditional kind of read through. And that's because actually to try and sit down and read it through when you've got deaf people and blind people and people with learning disabilities and neurodiverse people, I mean, just everybody in that space trying to kind of work out how each other communicates, it would have been a nightmare. So what we did is we very, very slowly, scene by scene, read the play through, and everybody who was in that space, including Bryony, the writer, including the stage management team, including the interpreters, we took a line each and we just passed it around the room, and everybody was encouraged to find a way gesturally to bring their line to life. And as part of that, we also had to remember that there were people in that room who couldn't see. And so we had to kind of find ways to use our voices. And in between each of those scenes, we also did other tasks to get ourselves as a team working together. So we sometimes drew the scenes to kind of think about what they looked like, maybe in our imaginations pictorially. Sometimes we would find a way to bring a scene to life purely visually. Sometimes we would then find a way to think about the story just hourly, but really kind of lots of story-based tasks that weren't about the text, but were actually about how we collectively going to bring the story to life through all of our senses, and how and to allow a whole week for that team of people to understand how each other communicates and what we all need from each other in the room, and kind of start to get comfortable with that, because there's a lot to take in. So that's kind of how we started. And then really, we then just worked our way through this mammoth play that changed script dramatically. What Bryony provided us with was a blueprint that we could work from, but brilliantly, she's not precious at all. So we could change, rewrite, you know, do whatever we need, cut, add, all of that. And I suppose the massive challenge was that all the way through we were thinking about how do we make the visual storytelling as clear and as exciting as possible, and how do we make the oral storytelling as clear and as exciting as possible. And like these guys have said already, with the visual side, that could also be this scene we're going to do full BSL, but this scene it's going to be visual vernacular, and this scene it's going to be gestural, and this scene it's just pure visual storytelling. And that's the same with the audio description as well. And that was a real challenge, wasn't it, team? In the room, was how do you audio describe a entirely silent scene where two people are signing to each other and have switched their voices off, and how do you make that accessible to a blind audience, because we weren't using headsets, so a blind audience weren't going to wear headsets to hear the audio description. They were also going to have that all part of the play. So it was such a challenge. Every day we would face wall after wall after wall of kind of, how do we do this? How do we solve this? I think what was brilliant was that I like to have a very open rehearsal room where everybody can contribute, everybody can make suggestions, everybody can feel ownership over the show. And I think that really helped, because it meant at any point anybody could chuck an idea in or say that they weren't getting it, you know, be creative in that process. So yeah, that's kind of how we went about. But it was really hard, but it was joyously hard. It was a total joy to have that level of creative challenge.
Definitely. I think in terms of the process for all of the deaf actors, they just the learning curve was just amazing as well, in terms of audio description and how to incorporate and embed that, you know, and to make it natural. And I think Ben, one of the actors, there was suggestions in terms of adding more breath when you were running, and so there were audio sounds to represent the action on stage that made it accessible, and there was a presence there. They understood that there was a presence of a character, like a key, a dangling of a key on the trousers. So when you heard the keys, you think, I know someone's coming, or, you know, so different sounds that could represent different action or different characters on the stage to make that accessible and just to empower the power of just a breath to represent someone's presence. And maybe it's a growl or a pant, or again, we explore different sounds and how we could bring that to stage. And so, you know, maybe if someone was being near, or if Bill Sikes was getting really angry, or a little whisper because somebody was near, you had to be quiet, or again, how we could represent sound in terms of action on stage. So, and again, I think, you know, there were different scenes about where we had to chat in private and be more of a whisper. So adding again that different depth and layers, so that we understood and the audience understood what was happening. Daryl, did you want to add anything in at this stage and add anything on what's been said?
I was just thinking when I was talking before about like Oliver himself, he's kind of like, he's aware of the deaf community, but really like his journey that he's going on, you see about the different accessibilities, and that person and that perspective, that deaf perspective, and the different oppressions that he goes through, and when he meets the deaf cultural group, when he meets the deaf cultural group and that team, he really creates a good connection with them people, and he feels that becomes part of his the word, but part of the gang, and he feels a bit pulled into that, and he feels like he's kind of forced to be part of that team. And then as he experiences that more, and he sees more gestural sign, and as he becomes more visual, he notices there's more oppression linked to that. And it was amazing to see, because it was like magic himself. It was like the colours that were coming to life as he became more and more visual through his gestural language. And obviously when he was using that VV, and he was thinking about Big Ben and how do you create that visually, and making the clock appear on the face and becoming a tower. So using that again, to demonstrate that visually. And with Oliver, and as it becomes more colourful, he becomes more aware of his identity and proud of his identity as a deaf person. Really, a lot of people can relate to that, and you can kind of see that, and how he finds that connection, and really it's successful as a team.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it was interesting because each different deaf individual was sort of, their identity was being challenged each time they came in contact with different characters. It's like, hang on, do we need to sign? Do we need to speech? And we needed to really find each deaf character and have their own individual journey through the play, and to really explore and show that, and show the struggles with each other as well, and that internal struggle, not only just external. So we had so many different layers of perspectives embedded within that. So obviously, we respected the original story and adapted it into such a rich degree to express this deaf perspective and journey through history and time. And I think in terms of how we've adapted that original story to bring in the deaf story and weave that through, I think it's just been incredible. I mean, Amy Leach, your directing prowess is just phenomenal. Just big hats off to the journey that you've taken us on and all the way through. And I think just being so open and creative and allowing us to have so much discussion with all the actors and everybody involved. I think really we've brought us together as everybody felt a part of the team. And I think that's one of the key elements, the way it made it such a rich experience. And I think that's why we were able to convey such rich individual characters as well throughout the casting. And I think this is how really a production should happen, behind the scenes and on stage. From the lighting and everything that we bring into the space, into the production, I just think was just phenomenal, just beautiful. I know we're running out of time, so I just really want to thank both of you, Amy and Daryl, for coming on board and having this chat with us today. It's just been, I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I know we could carry on and on for hours to talk about this. So to bringing it into a close, I really hope that those of you that are watching have really enjoyed this discussion, are encouraged to actually click and watch the production online, and just really sort of start taking consideration in terms of the deaf culture and characterization, and watch out for those things as you watch the production. And please really share your comments, add to the discussion. We want you to watch the play and really enjoy Oliver Twist. Watch it now, it's online, go and watch it now. And that's really easy to do. Invite it, make it an event, bring your friends and family on board, and just sit back and enjoy the veritable feast online and enjoy it. And remember,
it's not the musical version.
It's not the musical version. So you're not going to be having any singing and dancing across stage. It's our own interpretation and adaptation of the story. And it's a very dark story, but we know there's elements and flares of comedic moments that are woven through. So please, and again, thank you everybody for watching, and those, again, Amy and Daryl, for being involved in this discussion this evening.
Thank you.
And remember, we've got 5 episodes all together. This is just one of a series, and today we focused on the deaf perspective. However, all the other episodes will take on a different perspective of the production of Oliver Twist. There'll be set and design, there'll be the blind perspective, then lots of other different sort of focuses and themes, all relating to how we put together this Oliver Twist production. So please engage with all of them. Again, thank you again, and take care, everybody.
Thank you everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Kisses to all. Bye.
And our guests, Daryl Jackson, hosted by Stephen Collins, BSL interpreters, Anna Kitson, Amy Cheskin, Tom Holroyd, The Green Room, a Ramps on the Moon takeover, looking at the making of Oliver Twist at Leeds Playhouse, a video podcast produced by Strive, a collective made up of the DH Ensemble and Hot Coals Productions, supported by Ramps on the Moon. You can find all the videos and more at www.strivecollective.org/the-green-room, or alternatively visit the Ramps on the Moon Lessons Learned page at www.rampsonthemoon.co.uk/lessons-learned. Twitter at Strive Collective with no E, #TheGreenRoom_UK. Celebrating best practice, spotlighting unsung heroes, inspiring action. Logos for Strive, Hot Coals Productions and the DH Ensemble, Ramps on the Moon, and supported using public funding from Arts Council England.